Perfect. There we go. So, hello everyone. Welcome to this 60-minute workshop. The big takeaway for you is that we will be looking at data cleaning and preparation. Obviously, we do that on Excel and we continue to do it. But then today, we will be demonstrating how we use Power Query for it. Now, Power Query is available both on Excel and on Power BI. But Power BI is the number one business intelligence tool in the market. And that is what we will see today, how it works. Just a little bit of background in terms of who I am and what I do. So my name is Havish Madhupati. I run an analytics firm called Havisham Consulting. We are an award-winning firm. I'm a 40 under 40 analytics, a Microsoft certified trainer and office specialist, Power BI certified, a member of the NASSCOM network, a member of the global Microsoft community as well. In terms of clients, I work with a very wide variety of clients. So I have taught at the Big Four, the Big Three. I do a lot of training for government organizations as well. A lot of work in the energy and power sector in the CPG space. I'm a faculty at Shriram College of Commerce at IIM Kohikode, IIM Pikazabad, IIM Shillong, and Murshidabad. I've also taught at 17 of the IIMs and 8 of the IITs. My work has been featured in Business World numerous times, over 24 times. I've done a lot of political work and a lot of market research work for them. I do sessions regularly for Economic Times Masterclass, where I typically partner with, let's say, a partner from one of the big fours. I've conducted sessions for NASSCOM, for Indian Oil, Bharat Petroleum. These are all senior level officers, so CGMs and GGMs. I've done over 300 trainings for PwC and EY as well over a 4-year period. I've done a number of sessions for the Ministry of Education as well. And what else? The type of projects that I work on, I think you can find all this information on the website where all of this has been given. And then finally, last but not the least, I also have a YouTube channel by my name. There are 857 videos in it, which is a combination of things. So there are 60-second tips and tricks on everything related to Excel, PowerPoint, data storytelling, data visualization, as well as 10-hour, 12-hour long complete lectures that cover these topics. So I will circle back to it. Whatever questions you have at the end, I'll be extremely happy to answer that. What we have today is something we have been working on for a very long time. And we're very happy with the learning that we expect all of you to take away. So it's over to Neha now, who's one of my interns. And over the next 40-45 minutes, she'll take you through this real life business scenario of a client project that I'm handling currently. And then post that, any questions you have, we'll take it up. The chat window is open throughout. The audio is open. As in when you have any queries, you can put it on the chat window, and then we'll make sure to answer it by the end of the session. Neha, over to you. Let me give you the rights as well. All right. Can you check if you have screen sharing access, Neha?
Yes, sir. I'll just check.
Yeah.
So I'm unable to share my screen.
Okay, let me try to fix that. What about now?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to the workshop. Today, we'll understand how organizations can achieve business impact with data. So I'll start by giving you a little bit of the background to give you a little context as to the things that we're going to talk about. Then we'll move on to work on a real life case study, as Sir pointed out. This case study is based on NABARD's dataset, which is an organization Sir has currently worked with, or he has just concluded his project with NABARD. And although the data set is real, but the numbers have been changed, and these would be representative numbers. Now, today, we all know that, just a second. Yeah, today we all know that companies are turning digital. more and more companies are moving towards employing digital technologies. Now, all these digital technologies work on one thing, one very small elementary thing, indirectly or directly, and that is data. As we are moving on relying on data more and more, data, I mean, it would be fair to say that data is here to stay. In fact, IDC estimates that the amount of data created over the next 3 years will be more than the data created over the past 30 years. Now, that's a lot of data. So, as we're relying more and more data, we're not just relying on it for the purpose of using digital technologies, we're also relying on it for decision making. As is pointed out by Statistica, 77% of the companies in United States in 2020 reported relying on data to make business decisions. So as we are relying more and more on data for such important decisions, it is vital that the good quality of data is maintained. And this is not something that I am saying. This is something that Melody Sheen, who is the Senior Director Analyst at Gartner, has pointed out, that data quality is directly linked to the quality of decision making. But so how do we achieve good quality in a data? So that can be achieved by data cleaning. But it would be interesting for you to note that 76% of the data scientists view data preparation as the least enjoyable part of their work. And that is primarily because most of the process is quite repetitive in nature. Before any further ado, let's move on to working to the data set. So this data set is for NABARD. NABARD is a development bank that provides loans in the rural sector. So now I would like to present to you the data set. I hope my screen is visible. Can someone just give me a thumbs up so that I can continue? Okay. Okay, thanks, Anshul. So now let's start with working on the data set. Now, this is the data set that had been provided by the organization, which now the first look, you see like a lot of blank rows and columns. You see a lot of blank rows and columns. And this data set wasn't just created for the sake of the workshop. I just mean that this data is not purposely kept as a bad data. This is how most of the data is maintained across organizations. If you recall the bank statement that you might download from your bank's website, the format of that data is very similar to the one that I'm presenting here today. Now, so to do any sort of analysis on this data set, we have to ensure that the data is clean. So the first step that we want to do here is delete all the blank rows and columns that are visible to us. So if you look at this data set, you see that the column A, column B, which is not really visible. So I'll just, column B, and row 1, 2, and 3. These are the columns and rows which are just empty and will not be of any help if we were to analyze this data, right? So the first step that we want to do is first delete the image. The second would be to delete the rows, empty rows and columns. Let's start by deleting the first column. We select the column, go to delete, and then delete cells. The same we perform the same process for the next column as well. Now we start deleting the rows first, second, and third. We've deleted all the rows, empty rows and columns that were visible to us in the first look. Now the second step is to find if we have any merge cells. Now, now also in this workshop, we'll be working on two tools. One is Excel and the second is PowerBI. So the ultimate goal would be to load the data set that we're preparing or that we're working on currently on PowerBI. Now, I would just take a minute to show you if this data set, by just initially cleaning the empty rows and columns, were to be loaded to PowerBI, how it would look. So on my screen is a screenshot of how it would look on Power BI if the data was loaded without unmerging the cells or cleaning it any further on Excel. Let's get back to working on the data. Okay, so to unmerge the cells, the first step would be to find what all cells are we supposed to unmerge. To do that, we go to the Home tab, and then we go to the Find and Select option, select Find, go to Format, go to the Alignment tab, and then click on Merge Cells. Then you click on OK and Find All. We see that the first cell is merged, right? So now we can close this and just unmerge the cell. To unmerge the cell, we click, the entire row. We click on the row, go to Merge and Center, and unmerge it, right? Now the next step is to determine what values or what parts of the data set do we really require for analysis. Now, if you look at the data set, the first 3 rows of the data set describe what the data set is about, that it contains some confidential information and it is to be used for internal circulation only. This is some information that we don't really require for the analysis. So we would want to just delete it. Right? Now we're left with the column names. But an interesting thing to note here would be that the column names for all the columns are not really in the same row, right? I'll just check the chat box. Okay, here you observe that the titles are not in the same row, and that is something that we would want to maintain the uniformity across the data set. So to do that, we will copy the name of the columns from column E by pressing Control Shift and forward key, cut the names and then paste it on the row above. Okay, so we've done the preliminary cleaning that we were required to do. Now we'll be loading this data set onto Power BI. For that, I'll Just take a moment to open Power BI. Okay, this is the Power BI window. If you haven't previously worked on Power BI, let me just take a few minutes to introduce you to this tool. So today in Power BI, we'll basically be working on the data and the queries tab. That is the data tab, the queries tab, as well as the insert tab. So the data tab is used to extract our data from the source. And your source can be anything. It can be an Excel workbook. It can be an SQL server. The queries tab is used to transform and clean your data. And the third, that is the insert tab. It is used for the visualization part. That is to analyze your data better, present it in the form of charts and graphs. So the first step would be to load our data, that is the Excel workbook. So we go to Get Data, click on Excel workbook. Select the table that we want to load, and then we click on Transform Data. Now the window that is visible to you on your screen is the ParQuery Editor. This window helps you transform and prepare your data. So to start data cleaning and data prepping on Power Query, we'll first start by deleting the first row, which very evidently on the first look is null, and we don't require it for any analysis. So the first step would be to delete the first row. Let's see how we can do that. We go to the remove rows, and since it's the top row, we click on remove top row. We just want to delete one row, so we'll enter 1 and click on OK. We've deleted the null values from the top of the row, but it's possible that at the end of the data set, we might have empty rows there as well. So if you have previously worked on Excel, Excel is quite easy, in that sense. I mean, what I mean is, if you were working on Excel, it would have been really easy for you to go to the end of your data set by just pressing on the control and down arrow. But in Power BI, however, this feature is not available. So to go to the end of the data set, you'll have to actually scroll down. So let's scroll down. So now we see that we have two rows that have null values and which we would want to delete. So we again go to remove rows, but this time we want to remove the bottom rows. So we'll click on remove bottom rows. And this time we want to remove two of the bottom rows. So we'll enter the value 2 and click on OK. Okay. All right. So now the third step would be to, go through the data set once again. Now, as you can see that this data set has a lot of information. And broadly, I can divide the information into two parts. One is it contains information about the branches of different banks. right? For example, this is the District Central Cooperative Bank, Bilaspur, and then it talks about the number of rural, semi-urban, urban, and metropolitan branches of this bank. Then it talks about the number of staff, as in the number of employees, which is further divided into the number of officers and the number of other staff in that particular bank. Now, usually what people do, by people, I mean data analysts, they divide such information into different tables so that they're easy to handle. All right. It's not just easy to handle, it also reduces the complexity of the data set, right? So the next step would be to divide our data set, which is a big data set, into smaller tables. This is very similar to how we solve complex problems. So a very famous process of going around, complex problems is said to divide the complex problem into smaller, easy problems, right? That is the same approach that we're going to employ here. We're going to divide this big data set into smaller tables. Now, these tables are called as fact tables. And then there is another kind of table on Power BI that's called the dim table or the dimension table. Now, the fact table contains different information that is provided in the data set. In this data set, the information is broadly divided into two categories, that is the branch as well as the employees. But we also have to find what the dimension table for this, data set on Power BI would be. So the dimension table is something that contains unique values of the data set. Let's figure out which column or columns would provide us with the unique value, right? So the first column that we have is the name of the region, which cannot be unique because a region can have multiple banks. The next is the name of the state, which again can have a lot of banks because, as is quite evident in the first few rows itself, Chhattisgarh has 6 banks. The third is the name of the bank. Now, one bank is just going to have a single name. So the name of the bank would act in this case as our dimension table. Now, so to summarize what I have talked about in the past few minutes is in this case, we'll have 3 tables, 2 fact tables and 1 dim table. The 2 fact tables would be one for the branch type, and the second would be for employee. The third dim table would be for the name of the bank. So let's start creating these tables. So the first step would be to create a duplicate for the table that we're currently working on, right? Now we go back to the table and rename it as fact branch because I want to keep the information about the branches in the first table. So I'll just show you the step of how you can rename the tables. Either you can double click or you can right click and you can find the option of renaming the table, right? So let's rename it as fact branch. And in the next table, I want to keep information only about the employees of the employees of the banks. So I'm going to rename it as fact employee. Now let's start working on the fact branch table. So in this table, as I previously pointed out, we want information only regarding the branches of the bank. So we would want to delete information about the employees. So let's select the columns that we want to delete. And deleting columns is quite easy. You just have to select the columns by pressing Control and select the columns. And then just click on Remove Columns. Right. Now we have the total column, which I would for now delete. At a later stage, in just the next few minutes, I'll explain why I deleted this column. So let me just delete the total column as well. Now we're left with 4 columns that talk about the branches of the respective banks. But the problem with these 4 columns is the information is segregated into different columns, across 4 columns. Now, if I told you that there was a way all this information could be consolidated into just 2 columns, then that would be obviously a better way of presenting it, right? Now, this process of presenting the information that is in a pivot form into a table is called unpivoting. This process of unpivoting is not just limited to Power BI or ParQuery. This is something that is used across languages. For example, Python. I'll just take a moment to show this to you. So let's go to Stack Overflow. Yeah, so if you look at this, the first example, the way the format of the data is presented in a similar way, the way, the kind of data that we are working on. If you look at the first table, so the values are divided into different columns in a similar way as our values, the data set that we're working on. So just wanted to point that out. Let's get back to working on our data set. Yes. So now we would want to unpivot the 4 columns. To unpivot the columns, you select the columns that you want to unpivot. Go to transform data. And then you click on unpivot columns. Right. So now you see, right, the information that was distributed across 4 columns can now be seen in just 2. Now we would want to rename these columns. So let's rename the columns as branch type and number of branches. Okay, so we worked on the fact branch table. Now let's move on to the fact employee table. In this table, we'll perform similar steps that we had previously performed on the fact branch table. We'll delete the information that we do not require here, that is the information about the branches. Click on the columns that we don't require, go to the Home tab and remove columns. We'll delete the total employees, remove columns, and then unpivot the 2 columns. We'll go to transform, and then we'll click on unpivot columns. All right. We'll rename the column as, this is the employee type, and this is the number of employee. Right. So the reason why the total column for the branches as well as the number, as well as the employee type was deleted before, was that when you unpivot the columns, you get the total number, you get the total number with the attribute as is highlighted in the column that is being visible as green. Now we've worked on the fact tables. The next step is to work on the dimension table, but we don't have a dimension table currently. So to make the dimension table, we'll go back to the Excel workbook that we did the preliminary cleaning on. So let me just open the table. All right. On the Excel workbook, we will be working on a different sheet, a new sheet, which you can get by clicking on the plus sign. Now here, since I had pointed out that the dimension table has unique values, and the unique values in the dataset that we're working on will be obtained by the the name of the bank. So to get the unique names of the bank, what we can do is use a function in Excel that's called unique. So let's type in equal to unique. We go back to our workbook, select the column or the values that we want the unique values from, and then select enter. So now as a result, we have all the unique name of banks, right? Now, the next step would be to copy and paste these values. So the thing about using the unique function is if you go and press the delete key to the cell that you had applied the function on, so if I were to press the delete key on A2 cell, it would delete all the values. So to avoid that, we will copy and paste these values. Now we don't require the initial values, so we'll delete it. We don't require so many empty cells and rows, on the either side of our results. So we will cut and paste our values to A2. Right, let's give it a column name as well. The column name for this would be name of banks, right? And let's rename the sheet as dim name of bank. All right, now we can close the sheet and load the sheet again to the ParQuery, because that is where we're ultimately working on. So I'll be closing the Excel workbook. I'll go back to my ParQuery editor. And now, since the table that I want to work on is, has not been obtained from the source, I will go to the Home tab, click on New Source, go to Excel Workbook, click on my workbook, select Open. Okay, so now I want to select the table that I would want to work on. Initially, we selected the branch and staff DCCB table, but now I want to work on the dim name bank. So I'll select that and click on OK. Now, here you observe that the name of the column is actually in the first row, and we don't want that. So to fix that, you can just go to the top ribbon and select use first row as headers. Right. So now we've worked on, we've created the 3 tables that we required. The next step would be to create a relationship between the 3 tables. For now, we have information, we have our data, but our data is present in isolation. Like all the 3 tables are present, but they're present in isolation. So let's look at how can we build a relationship between these 3 tables. To do that, also we're done with the data cleaning and prepping part. We have prepared our data. So now we'll close the ParQuery editor. To do that, we click on Close and Apply. Okay, so we are back to the Power BI window. Now the Power BI window has 3 kind of views. If you look at the left side, leftmost part of your screen, you'll see that there are 3 icons. The first is the report view, where all the visualizations in the report are present. when you see different dashboards, it is the report view that you're actually seeing. The second is the data view, which contains all the data that you are working on. The third is the model view, and this view is created to build relationship between the different tables. So as I said earlier, that we have our information in place, which is clean and prepared, but they're in isolation and we need to connect them, which is very evident from what is visible on the screen. So now we have two branch tables, one dim table that I would want to bring in the middle. Also, usually people work on quite a large data set. So they have like multiple fact tables, right? Now, these fact tables are usually arranged in the form of a star, and hence the concept of fact and dim tables usually comes under something that is called as the star schema. Just wanted to share that. Now we will start by building relationships. To build relationships, we'll just drag and drop the common elements in all the three tables. So let's start by building a relationship between the fact branch and the dim name book table. In both these tables, name of bank is a common element, right? So we're just going to drag and drop the name of the bank from one table to another. Right. So this is the relationship that both of them share. This relationship is called one-to-many relationship. And it's also very obvious because one bank can have multiple branches. And this is also what our data set was. One bank had 4 branches. Now we're going to do the same for between dim name bank and fact employee table. Right. Okay. So we've built the relationship. This is the modeling view. We have built a model. Now we would want to visualize our data, right? So we'll go to the report view. I will start with a very basic chart, that is the stacked column chart. On the x-axis, I want the name of banks. And on the y-axis, I want the total number of employees. So there you go. Right. So this chart will help you see the number of employees in different banks. Now, this would be across region and across states. All right. There is another very interesting feature in Power BI. As the world is talking about AI and AI is the new buzzword, there's AI in Power BI as well, which is called the Q&A feature. Okay, so the Q&A feature allows you to type in a question that it will automatically answer and you don't have to perform any sort of calculations. So for that, if I want to see the total if I want to see the total number of employees, I'm sorry, it's lagging because there's something wrong with my network. And it'll just give you the number of employees. If you were to do it manually, you would have had to write a big formula to take the sum of all the employees across categories, that is the officers and other staff. Now, if I want to see the total number of employees by Yeah. So for example, I want to see the total number of employees of a particular bank, say Faizabad Jila Shahakari Bank. I can see that as well. There's 121 employees. So yes, Power BI is a very important tool, especially today when the world is moving towards automation. One advantage of Power BI over Excel is all the processes are recorded in Power BI at the the rightmost corner of your screen. And if you were to, if you were to add data to your Excel workbook, you just have to click on refresh option, and you will see the reports and the visualizations changing real time without having to actually manually change everything. This is the reason why most companies are moving towards Power BI now from Excel. So that's all. I hope you liked the session. I'll be sharing across the PPT that I shared with you. The PPT has all the screenshots of all the processes as well as the statistics. So that's all. Thank you for coming to my workshop. This was my first workshop, and or any reviews are welcomed. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Neha. Everyone, the platform is open now. Any questions that you have related to what we showed you today, or any other question generally related to data analytics, the importance of Excel, Power BI, Power Query, feel free to ask. Maybe she will answer it. Otherwise, I'm always here to ask. And let me remind you that the project that we just worked on, this is a real life problem. I was at NABARD last week for grade D officers, teaching them how to work with Excel and Power BI effectively. Of course, the numbers having changed, but other than that, the entire data set, the requirement, the process, everything is the same. So, a lot of times students say we want to not just work on a project, but then try and see how a company is using it. This is as real as it gets, right? 100% what was taught to them is what was taught to you today as well. So, Abhishek, Akash, Anshul, any questions that you have? So some common questions could be on the lines of why we're not using Excel for it. I hope you see that whatever we do on Power BI is automated because it records a step. That means that tomorrow, if you get a new file, after the preliminary data cleaning, you can just click on the refresh button and it gets refreshed. Even if you're working on like a really large data set, it still works, right? So I would just try to share my screen, everyone, and show you one other thing. Neha, you did not show them anything on ChatGPT yet, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So just to give you some ideas, so on ChatGPT, if I want to talk about unpivoting, I can say how to do an unpivot on Power Query. Then I can say how to do it on SQL, how to do it on Python, right? And then you see that the process, the actual steps could be a little different, but then the fundamental of data cleaning and the importance remains the same. So on Power Query, of course, is the easiest because you don't really have to write any statements or any formulas. It just works, right? On SQL, obviously, you have an unpivot. And same way in Pandas, you have a unpivoted underscore data frame, which is the data frame originally that we're taking, and then we're unpivoting it. You will notice that, in fact, the names that are given, the attribute in batch query is also the same. That's exactly what we had in Power Query as well. So remember, it's not about the tool. The reason we chose Power BI is because as a data analyst, Power BI would be a must know. It's not an optional tool. That is something that you absolutely need to know and be very good with. But then the fundamental of what you're learning will apply across multiple applications and across different languages, right? Perfect. I'm also going to share my YouTube link with everyone. There's a lot of content on it. So if you like this content, you should definitely go and have a look at everything else that is there. And we do intend to do more sessions in the future. So do feel free to look out and hope to see you again very soon. Great. I think that would be all from our side. Thank you, Neha. Thank you, everyone,
Thank you.
for taking out the time on a Sunday. And I hope you had some learnings and takeaway from the session.
Thanks,
Avish. Thanks, Neha.
Thank you.
Thank you, Neha. Thank you, Avish. Bye.
Thank you.